Continue to share. Hopefully you can see that. Please shout at me if you can't.
It's all
Uh,
fine.
Super. Thank you ever so much. So, as I said, I'm part of the National Emergency Briefing team. As lots of you will probably know, the National Emergency Briefing Initiative started in November of 2025. We had an in-person event for MPs, business leaders, faith leaders, peers, various celebrities turned up as well at Westminster Hall, which is the building you can see there in the picture. And the idea was that 8 leading UK scientists and experts would brief the audience on the latest science on the climate and nature crisis in order to fully inform them about the risks that we now face. And they covered a range of different topics. Each speaker spoke for about 12, 14 minutes and covered a specific issue to them. There were talks on food security, on health, on extreme weather, national security, etc., etc. Let me have a look here. So that's the a little shot for you of the hall. There's Angela Francis, who was talking about economics while we were there. And now, following the event, the team went away and basically took all of the amazing footage that we had of the scientists talking and put together a 50-minute documentary featuring Chris Packham, which took a slightly different take from the actual event itself. As the event was very science-led, the film that we put together was actually very much focused on the emotion that the science kind of triggers in people. So it's a real attempt to have this film be a conversation about how we feel about things and how we feel about the impacts that we're already seeing. Um, the film itself takes a kind of Gogglebox format. I don't know if any of you have seen that Channel 4 show, but basically people sit on the sofa and watch television. So this was Chris Packham sitting with some celebrities and ordinary Britons talking about watching the briefings and then talking about their reactions to them. I'm just going to play you, I'm hoping this will work. Let's see, play you the 1 minute trailer for the film.
The climate we live in today is the least extreme climate we will experience in our lifetimes.
That's a shocker.
In November of last year, I joined some of the UK's top scientists to bring MPs up to date on all aspects of the climate and nature crisis, on our weather, our food supply, our health, our national security.
Europe's been hit again and again by severe floods.
Those narrow streets, you can see that happening in London or another city here.
This is what happens when food systems fail.
I honestly don't think people realise how immediate this is going to be.
The climate crisis is now a threat to national security. But what we need to do on climate also makes Britain safer.
This is like a today issue, not tomorrow.
None of this is impossible, and the rewards on the other side are enormous.
There is the potential for great change and for things to be better.
Spread the word. Invite your friends and neighbours to go to a screening.
I'd make sure that everybody and every school and every place of work had to sit down and listen to this.
Brilliant. So hopefully that will work. Sorry. That'll teach me not to do the wrong thing. So let me work out how to get past this. There we go. Fantastic. Thank you. Sorry for the technical hitch. So the People's Emergency Briefing was released in April earlier this year. Currently, so the aim was essentially two things. One was to inform the UK public about the gravity and urgency of the environmental crises that we face. None of us quite expected summer 2026 to be quite the way it has been. So, you know, in many ways, the timing has been, I don't want to use the word perfect, but the timing has been interesting, shall we say, in terms of alerting people to the fact that we are in the midst of quite a serious crisis. And the second aim was to build support for the government to hold a national televised briefing. Now, this wasn't to screen the film. This was very much to go into that kind of COVID briefing to the nation that we saw a few years ago, but focused on the climate and nature crisis. So far to date, we've had almost 3,200 screenings have been registered on the map on the website. Some of those have already been held. Obviously, some of those are upcoming. We've got screenings running all the way through this year into next year. There's just seems to be an inexhaustible appetite for screenings. And it's continuing to grow. We estimate, and this is a very hard figure to tell, but we estimate based on kind of average audiences that by the time those 3,000 screenings are done, we'll probably have 180,000 people will have seen the film in community settings. And the film is very much geared to be part of an event. So it's a 50-minute film followed by a facilitated discussion talking about the emotional impact of the film, the impacts that are being seen in the community from climate and nature breakdown, and then mobilize people to take the next step in terms of lobbying MPs, hosting their own screenings, spreading the word, and kind of being part of this journey that we're currently on. So we're seeing 145 cross-party MPs have now supported our call for a televised emergency briefing, which is growing at a really amazing rate. We're seeing 5, 6 MPs a week seem to be signing up to join the call. And we also, this weekend, our petition that Chris Packham had launched calling for a televised emergency briefing by the government crossed the 100,000 signatures mark, which is quite a key milestone. And that basically means it will now be considered for debate within Parliament. We're waiting to hear when exactly that will be. And so what we're really seeing is this film is actually changing the national conversation in really interesting ways. So it's been getting huge media attention. There was a caller on James O'Brien's LBC show a few days ago who was, breaking down in tears, talking about she volunteered at a National Trust property. She was talking about the impact she's seeing working there and her attempts to get the film screened at the National Trust property where she works. But what we're really seeing it doing is an incredible job of mobilizing people. So we're lucky to be partnered with some brilliant academics at Bath University, and they've been doing a survey that runs kind of before people see the film and then afterwards, and charting their responses to their reaction to the film and how that's shaping their opinions. So we've seen that after seeing the film, 56% of audience members come out feeling more hopeful, versus 15% who feel less so. And that's really quite something because the film is very hard hitting. What we hear from a lot of people is very emotional. Some people haven't been, exposed to the science before and don't actually realize quite how bad things are. So for some people, there is a real emotional component to it. But it's great to see that actually people are feeling more hopeful as a result of seeing it and having the conversations that follow the film. But also, the key stat for us is the 87% who feel motivated to act. And so that to us is a real sign that this is potentially really mobilizing people to continue taking action in the kind of climate and nature space. And the key for this is that what the film does, I think, really well is it's informing people about the risks that we're facing. And people are actually finding that quite empowering. And this is quite contrary to what a lot of MPs are telling us. So quite a few MPs are saying, we're really worried about scaring people because we think if we scare people, they won't want to take action. And we're really hesitant about doing that. But the research that we've seen actually shows kind of the opposite. And it's been interesting timing because the release of the emergency briefing in November and then the release of the film in April has kind of run parallel to some other things that have been happening within this space, which kind of suggests that the public isn't being fully informed. Now, lots of you probably know about the Joint Intelligence Committee report. That's this on global biodiversity loss as a national security risk to the UK. The Times newspaper got hold of a copy of that report and also a DEFRA report that was talking about Britain's food supply at risk of catastrophic failure by 2030. As far as I know, the DEFRA report still hasn't been publicly released. The Joint Intelligence Committee report, so that's the one written by MI5, MI6, was released in an abridged form. I think it was something like 120 pages, reduced down to 20, after lots of campaigning by people across the UK. There's currently a parliamentary debate coming up in September about it as well. And I know, so my MP sits on the Environmental Audit Committee, and I understand that even the Environmental Audit Committee was blocked from seeing a full copy of the report, even though they have kind of privileged access to get hold of things like that. So there is a sense that, this emergency briefing and the People's Emergency Briefing is filling something of a gap where people are feeling that they're not being given all of the facts. And as I said, this summer, I think, has really focused minds. The extreme heat waves we've been seeing this summer, coupled with earlier in the year, things like Storm Goretti. I've spoken to a lot of people who live in Cornwall and the southwest who've talked to me about just how devastating that experience was for lots of them, actually. Whole villages cut off for several days without power, water, internet, phone. So it does feel like we're seeing a cascading series of crises, if you like, and that people minds are being focused as a result. So I just want to talk very briefly about our theory of change. So our theory of change is very much that by informing the public fully about what needs to be done, the government will actually put itself in a stronger position to be able to deliver on what it needs to do. Now, you may have seen in the seventh carbon budget, budget 7, the advice to the government was very much that there needs to be public buy-in for the changes that need to happen, because they need to happen at such scale. And in order to do that, the public needs to be fully informed about the risks that we face in our communities. So there is a real sense that by owning the emergency of the urgency of the problems, excuse me, the urgency of the emergency, the government can really put itself in a really strong position to be able to properly have the conversation with the public about the risks, properly have the conversation about what needs to be done, and secure public buy-in in terms of next steps. So that this idea, as you can see on the last part of this slide here, space opens up for action, very much about increasing trust between government and public, opening up new pathways for public participation. I mean, I think in many ways the film is bringing that public participation along in many ways, outside of a kind of government role within communities. And really then does put the government in a position to be able to actually deliver on its existing commitments and whatever other commitments it might feel that need to be brought into bear, given the scale of the crisis that we're facing. So just very briefly, so we've been doing a lot of work just recently with local councils that I thought might be of interest to you. So we know that councils are in the front line of the climate and nature crisis. Over 100 councils now have held people's emergency briefings, either for public, but increasingly we're seeing them holding it for staff and elected members. Some of these have held them multiple times. I think as a total aggregate, we're over 200 screenings now at a council level, and this is all sizes of council, from parish all the way up to the biggest metropolitan councils. We've actually started, so this kind of happened organically without our input, and so we've now actually realised that we kind of need to support councils in this. So we're actually stepping up. We have a specific councils pack that we're now sharing out to local councils, and it talks a lot about the impact of climate and nature risk on delivery of services. I mean, that's a really key thing for councils, business continuity and community resilience. And the aim is, unlike some of the training that councils do, that's brilliant, like carbon literacy training, all of these brilliant things, this prompts a slightly different conversation in our experience. So it runs really nicely in parallel with some of the training that councils are already putting into place. And we've seen councils starting to pass motions in support of a televised emergency briefing by the government. And they started doing that of their own accord, actually. So it's something that we're now encouraging, because we know this is a really good way for putting grassroots pressure onto MPs and also members of devolved administrations as well, from council level upwards, calling for our kind of bigger ask. And these council screenings, I should say, are kind of happening alongside other organisation screenings that we're now seeing happening as well. So we've seen an awful lot of really major UK organisations asking to screen the film internally for staff, people like the Met Office, Transport for London, National Theatre, Channel 4, Environment Agency, Nationwide Building Society. The list goes on and on. So we're actually working, we now have specific resources for workplace screenings, for business screenings. There's a bit of crossover between those two, obviously. This autumn, we're launching a special schools pack for schools for sixth forms and colleges. So 16 upwards is our kind of target range there. And really looking at using the film as a way to spur young people into stepping up as civic actors and giving them all the scaffolding that they need in order to encourage them to do that, and really engage with their MPs on this issue, but also wider on climate and nature issues. And that kind of brings me to, I guess, what's next really for us. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we have this key petition which runs to November. So we've been pleasantly surprised by the fact that we've hit this 100,000 milestone ahead of the actual petition, way ahead of the petition coming to an end. I mean, we're only in August. So we're waiting to hear about what the parliamentary debate timeframe will be for that. There's currently a conversation happening with the petitions committee. But we do also see, looking forward into the autumn and the winter, the scientists are warning there are real risks of increasing impacts from the El Nino that's currently happening, they call it Super El Nino, Godzilla El Nino, which is not just going to be across the globe, but also is likely to hit us here in the UK in the autumn. Which after the summer we've had and the impact on farmers and businesses, it suggests that there's not going to be any let up for climate and nature breakdown being kind of a key topic of conversation. We're seeing grassroots pressure continue to grow on MPs. As I said, we're seeing several MPs every week joining the call for a televised emergency briefing. This is really cross-party, which is great to see. Screenings in terms of the pipeline, it looks like we'll be continuing into 2027. There doesn't seem to be any let up in appetite. People are really keen to screen this film. We're seeing people hosting it multiple times. The most I heard of someone who's done 11 screenings now within their community, which is, really, really quite something. And I think it's something that people find really rewarding to do. Unlike a lot of things in the climate and nature sphere, this actually feels like something that's very deliverable, manageable, has a certain end and an output that is visible. And I think that maybe ties in with some of the enthusiasm that we've encountered for it. And alongside that, we're also seeing kind of international expansion. So organically, again, we've seen people in other countries hosting the film in their communities, which is something that we're really happy for them to do. We now have subtitled versions of the film in I think it's French, German, Czech, Bengali, a whole range. But we're also seeing other groups internationally taking the model that we've built, and we've kind of open sourced it for other groups, and kind of running it in their own countries. So I understand that Germany is looking at doing one in 2027, which would be its own national emergency briefing using its own scientists in a kind of live setting event, and then following up with its own version of the People's Emergency Briefing film, again following the same format but with local experts, celebrities, local people, taking that out to communities across Germany. So that's something that's really exciting. We think there's potentially more to be done there. But yes, so essentially, I'm here on this call today to say, if you haven't already seen the film, please do go along and see one. And if it's something that you'd be interested in hosting, either within your community or within an organization that you're part of, please do have a look at the website. I'll pop the details in the chat in a minute. Get in touch directly with me if you have any questions. But yes, we'd love to have you be part of this initiative. So I'm just going to stop screen sharing, and then if anybody has any questions, I would be very happy to hear.
Jamie, thank you very much for that. That's really interesting, actually, to see how the numbers are growing. I've got a couple of questions of my own, which you triggered during your speech. So do we have any idea of what it is that causes MPs to feel that they cannot give the general British public bad news, that there's going to be horror and desperation? And this is a country that's been bombed to pieces during the Second World War. It's had all sorts of instances, and every instance shows that we come out stronger than ever. So where do they get this feeling that they can't tell us the bad news? Do you know?
I can hazard a guess, and I don't claim to be an expert into the thinking of MPs, but my guess would be that the majority of MPs, according to research that came out quite recently, I think a couple of months ago maybe, are actually underestimating the level of appetite for change across the country from their constituents. And I think generally MPs are thinking that actually this issue is something that constituents don't care about, or they're worried about us making too big changes too quickly. But the polling that I've seen, I'll need to find the link to it. I don't remember whose polling it was, does suggest that actually they're underestimating that appetite completely. So I think that maybe ties into some of it. I think an awful lot of the time it needs someone to step up and say that this is an emergency in order for us to get beyond that bystander effect and really, I think, for everybody to be on the same page. And that's a lot of what this initiative is all about, resetting that national conversation so that we can say, actually, we really are in a crisis and it's not going to go away anytime soon. Next year is likely to be worse than this year, etc., etc. So we do need to rethink how we communicate to the public and how we communicate to each other as well.
And the other question I had was the reaction from MPs. Do you see any shift? Because our MP came to our showing, and he's only a young man, he's in his 30s, and he assured us that the MPs in Parliament that he had met and talked to were fully aware of the situation and were going to do something about it. And 3 days later, the Conservative Party announced that if they got back into power, they would immediately chop all the net zero nonsense that's going on. So I thought he was, as a Conservative MP, really in touch with his own organisation. Anyway, lots of people have questions, so let me pass it on to Stuart, please.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thanks very much for that interesting summary of the film. I think most of us on this meeting have actually seen the film. One of my big concerns at the moment is the sort of lurch to the right of politics. Essex County Council has now become Reform. Their first major policy was to scrap stupid net zero. I was just listening to a press briefing by the Shadow Energy Secretary talking about building more gas power stations, backpedaling on the wind and solar, obviously get rid of this stupid net zero. Does the NEB have any sort of response to this?
That's a very interesting question, Stuart. So I should start by saying that the National Emergency Briefing is completely non-partisan. So we are science-led, and we're not we're trying to stay out of the politics of this, obviously. And the MPs that support the call out to MPs, obviously, is cross-party as well. That said, I do recognise the description that you're talking about in terms of a general step towards away from tackling the emergency at the scale and speed that's necessary. So really what our role is, we think, is very much to focus on the science and ensure that we're getting that science out to the public, which is what I think the film does a really good job of, what the individual briefings that are on the website, but you can see in more depth, do a great job of. And it really is our hope that by properly informing the public, then the public will be able to make the choices necessary and put the pressure on where it feels is necessary onto politicians. And I think, I mean, I really do come back to this because I think it's really true. I think this year has certainly changed people's opinions in some ways about how far away the risk seems compared to maybe how close it is. And I think definitely it's a very difficult position now to be taking, to be saying you are against mitigating climate crisis when we are seeing UK food production on the brink of collapse, as per the DEFRA report that the Times reported on. You know, talking about the realistic potential for catastrophic collapse of UK food supply by 2030. Who knows how accurate that will turn out to be, but the fact that that's even a conversation for 4 years ahead, to me makes it very untenable to hold a position of it's just a heat wave, it's just summer, we don't need to do anything about this. So I think the really interesting thing we'll see to be how that conversation evolves between mitigation and adaptation. I sense there's going to be a lot of, well, we can just adapt our way out of this, when I think the science is really clear that in order to have any ability to adapt, we really need to be mitigating at the same time at all, because the level of change we're going to see is likely to be unadaptable to.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see the government's response to Jackdaw and Rosebank. Thank you.
Exactly. Yes, no, I agree. Thank you, Stuart.
Gary, please.
Hi, Jamie. Congratulations on your global reach of the briefing. That is, I've looked at the map recently, and I was quite surprised to see all those flags popping up all over the world. Looking at the map, last time I looked, there was clear gaps in the geographical spread of the briefings. There were whole communities, quite large communities, that didn't seem to have any show screenings at all. Are you actively working to kind of target these missing communities to get them screenings so that people in those communities can go and see the film?
We are. It is something that we're very aware of, and we look at that map as well and are aware of the need to reach out. I mean, I should add that we are a very small team, and to say that we are over capacity would be quite an understatement, I think. So we are struggling. We are struggling to do it, and we really are reliant on hosts to be coming to us to screen, because obviously we don't have the capacity to be running our own screenings in these communities. We are working through partners to try and reach out to people in places where there are yet to be screenings, but it is a slow process. I'm hoping though that this is actually it's part of a long tail. So at the very beginning, obviously, we had a small number of screenings and they've mushroomed, increasingly. And I'm hoping as that mushroom effect continues, we will see screenings starting to happening in places where there currently aren't many. And it does seem to be what we've noticed and what really excited me actually, because it's only in the last few weeks that we've really seen this. We are now seeing that when someone puts a screening on the map, they're saying to us, I've already got 30 bookings and I haven't even advertised this yet. And it appears to be that people are actually coming to the National Emergency Briefing website, searching for their postcode and searching to find the nearest screening. So I'm really hopeful that this will encourage more people, when they're on the website, to see that they can host as well and say, actually, yes, maybe I'll take that step. So I realize I'm not giving you a firm answer because I think the reality is we're really over capacity. So it's very difficult to have someone completely on point on that issue, even though we'd like to. It's something that we're trying to reach out to other partners to kind of support us in. One of the interesting things, though, has been local councils running screenings, because I think they're actually really well placed to maybe run screenings in places where potentially the public maybe don't feel they have the confidence or the ability or the means or the time or the capacity to run them themselves. So one thing we've also seen local councils doing recently, I'm beginning to see an awful lot more library screenings, which is really fascinating. And libraries being that hub of the community, I know how cuts have devastated them. Is a really great way to bring in other members of the community who maybe wouldn't have come across this initiative yet, and maybe then can be encouraged to host their own screenings too.
Thank you. Christopher Farn, please. You appear to be talking to us from the International Space Station. It's wonderful. This is your background view, Chris. And you're muted at the moment. There we go. You've gone back to being muted, Chris. You did successfully unmute yourself, but then it's gone back. There we go. We can hear you now. Nope, you stopped it. So you're still muted, Chris? No, not yet. You should be able, if you speak now.
I'll bring you back in a minute. Okay.
Chris, you're showing as unmuted, but you're not. Oh, you're frozen. Can you hear me
now?
Yep. We can hear you. It's just gone off again. I think you're probably suffering from slow connectivity and a slow computer. So when you hit it and nothing happens, you come off. At the moment, you're showing as unmuted.
Yeah.
If you speak,
can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Now. Okay, thank you, Jamie, for a good presentation, a good catch up. I'm the climate lead councillor in the Forest of Dean District Council, and we've had climate literacy courses for the last 2 or 3 years. Emergency back in 2018. I've seen many of these briefings. I've seen many of these speeches which say, there is hope if we act now. And people tend to walk away from those meetings and those TV programs, and it's almost unbelievable, but they forget. They're distracted by something else. Every day life cuts in, and any groups that form to tackle, locally to act on the climate emergency tend to wither and die and walk away and fold. I can understand that the main reason for having these people emergency briefings is to influence MPs to put in alternatives to the systems we're currently running, so the carbon footprints themselves. But also, I also understand that some of the MPs do not share that view and do not want to join up for various reasons. And if they don't, and if the government doesn't act urgently as they should do, are there any ways that we can sort of go around the government and provide a bigger movement like we had in 2018, which almost not holds them to ransom, but puts them in such a difficult position that they cannot continue, burning fossil fuels, contracts with oil contracts, and not providing us with the public transport systems that we need, etc., etc. So it's a bit of a roundabout question to say, what happens when nothing happens?
Jamie, I think the ball's back on your court.
Okay, sorry, I was just checking Chris had finished. Thank you, Chris. Really interesting question. I feel like I'm going to deflect it slightly in two ways. The first way is to say, I think what's really interesting about this is that something is happening. We're really seeing a massive mobilization in a way. I've been working in this space for the last 7, 8 years, and this is the biggest mobilization I've seen for a long time, it feels like. So I guess the first thing to say is it feels like something is happening. Where that will lead us, we will need to see, but it does feel like people are laser focused in terms of ensuring that the government is being frank with the public. And I think it's becoming increasingly difficult for them to not be, as the impacts are really hitting us now. The proposition seems to be very different. In terms of what to do, should the government fail to deliver what I might say it needs to deliver, and some of us here would say, I think that might be beyond the scope of what the National Emergency Briefing is doing. We have a very clear goal in terms of the televised emergency briefing. I think the conversation around what other methods there are would probably be best asked of other initiatives and groups. And the climate and nature movement is a very large one, and we're only a small part of this. So I think it's probably incumbent on me not to speak for others or to represent other people's interests in this. But there are clearly lots of parallel tracks that are running at the same time at the moment, put it that way. And I think what we see are the people who are hosting screenings, are coming to screenings, are people who wear lots of different hats, whether that be in terms of other activism, in terms of volunteering with other groups or involvement with other groups. And it does feel as though we're all pushing in the same direction at the moment, albeit sometimes through different means. So I think that conversation is probably one that would need to have more people than just me here, to be honest with you.
Okay. I'm assuming, Chris, that
can
means
I just come back quickly?
Yeah.
Can I ask whether you have a template motion to a full council, asking the government
yes.
to take this seriously, and also writing to the MP to make sure the MP is on board? And if so, could you send it to me, please?
Certainly.
I could get that through for the September full council.
Fantastic. We actually have a council's pack, which I will pop into the chat in a second. And that has the template motion and everything else that you need, which would be really useful to you. And if you do need to, I'll pop my email address as well. Feel free to reach out to me if that's useful.
And on to Andrew, please.
Many thanks. Hi, Jamie. Great to have heard from you and to see the latest results from the screenings. I understand about the laser focus that you've mentioned, because we experienced that firsthand. We've had a great collaboration. Has been very much ever since we started in Herefordshire, actually, focusing on getting parishes and their communities to work together on climate action and nature recovery. We've been continually developing on that. And I understand the focus of Simon and Nick and the NEB team on getting something happening at parliamentary level, at government level. But in the meantime, there are a lot of us who feel that actually doing things at the grassroots and working, the bottom-up approach is really what's going to make more of a difference more quickly, and it's important to get that through. We have done, I've put it in the chat, we did do a briefing about this. We did our own 10-minute film, would you believe, for parish councillors. And I wrote to the team. I appreciate you've only been there for 5 weeks, James. This is before your time, so I'm not shouting at you, my friend. End of April, and sent this across, and the message came back, thanks for this, Andrew. We will look to discuss how we can action some of these points this week, exclamation mark. Well, none of them has happened. And people are getting into these screenings and they're not being made available the opportunity to think about encouraging community action, local action, which some people are asking for, and which we've done some advice for. And maybe, perhaps now that we've got 100,000 things for a debate in Parliament, Simon and Nick and your team might feel that they've achieved a great deal. But I'm going to ask you you've got the community organiser hat. Whether you think actually at some point using the film to encourage more local action might be possible.
Yes, Andrew, and I think I did see your email back in July after I joined, and I was really grateful to Linda for connecting us up, because you were on my to-do list of people to speak to, and apologies for the slow delay. As I said, this has been a bit of a roller coaster ride for the NEB team, and the sheer level of requests is quite overwhelming, to be honest. But we are chugging through them. Apologies if it took a little bit longer than it should have done to get back to you. I completely agree about local action. So I've hosted lots of these screenings myself. And we are really keen to give people the opportunity at the end of the screenings to bring in local groups who might be involved. We do not say to hosts, please don't signpost to local groups. In fact, quite the opposite. I'm currently going through with colleagues going through the screening guidance and everything else. And we're updating that at the moment. And that's definitely something that I'm adding in, a kind of more signposted version of, yes, please. I think it's really important. The mobilization that's happening is bigger than just the mobilization for the televised emergency briefing. We're really keen to see people continue taking local action at a local level. The problem is, of course, is that it's really decentralized for us. So we're reliant on local hosts to actually be holding those follow-up meetings for audience who come, signposting people in the right direction to local groups and actions that they know about, and obviously that we don't have on the ground knowledge of. So there is that slight disconnect there. So I'm hoping that updating the screening guidance and the kind of support package that we give to hosts will really encourage that. And I actually think, part of the civic engagement thing that we're adding in now in terms of speaking to local councils, parish councils upwards, for people who've been to a screening, I think, that kind of maybe helps in that way as well, of making people realise that this isn't just come and see the film and sign the letter to your MP, but is actually part of a pattern of ongoing continued action, because actually the what you've just learned about in the film is so huge. So I completely agree with you, Andrew, on what you're saying. And it is in hand, I think. And I'm hoping we'll see some really fruitful results moving forwards. And as I said, screenings are continuing on into next year. So while this would have been great to have everything perfect in place in April, we've been on quite a learning experience in terms of how hosts are using the packages we're giving them, what some of the local reactions are, what people actually want to see locally as well. So we're encouraging lots of feedback from people and trying to shape things in a way that will make things more streamlined for them, and be more productive in terms of a continued pathway of mobilization beyond just the go to a screening and sign a petition. So yes, thank you.
I'm enormously pleased to hear what you've just said. What we've produced is a 10-stage approach to community action, which very much references the guidance that you've already produced from your team, and is intended to be integrated with it. So, and absolutely, it's got to be a local leadership that carries on with this. So, dare I suggest that sharing that advice with screens, which you've promised in public you will now look at, is one simple way to solve that particular issue. The other thing I'd mention while I've got the microphone is that one of the concerns about all of this, and this has been raised in different ways by people already, it's the way we tell them. How do we reach people with these important messages? Obviously, the film has done a great piece of work, but we still got this horrible, rather sterile net zero or not net zero debate happening in the press. So we're getting together with other community climate organisations in October to look at how we might actually work together to identify, develop and support a continuous wellspring of positive actions, very much looking at what people can be doing at a local level. So if indeed the NEB team are wanting to get into that line of work as well, please let me know, because we're having that meeting on October the 13th.
Brilliant. Please do feel free to share anything on that line with me. As I said, I'm literally in the process of rewriting some of the materials now. So it would be, if you do have anything that you think I should be looking at, send it my way, because I would really value the experience that's on this call. Would be fantastic. So thank you.
Welcome. Can I say welcome? Thank you.
David, please.
Jamie, this isn't going to be targeted at you, because actually what you're doing is getting people mobilized, and that's the function of the climate emergency briefing. It's about engaging people. Going back to your point, Graham, about why do MPs sort of react the way they do, I think two things. One, I think there is a tendency by government to treat us as children. So there's an element of the nanny state. You know, we're not old enough and ugly enough to make our own decisions. We'll make it for you. I think that's part of it. The other bit is, psychologically, we tend to reflect what we feel on other people. So if an MP feels overwhelmed and doesn't quite know how to do it, he therefore makes that sort of subconscious decision that everybody else feels the same as him. So I think there is an element of how do we get these MPs to actually sort of realize that we're all adults in the room, and that we are quite capable of making hard, difficult decisions, and that we are part of the solution, not part of the problem. I find this, I mean, I know some of you have heard this before, but I find the whole thing utterly frustrating about how the sort of lack of joined up thinking, because in fact there are two things going on simultaneously. There is the climate threat. The climate threat is generating, or has the capability of generating, a security threat. So we've got immigration as a part of that, but also we've got, you know, potentially the Russian threats coming through too. And yet, where we're talking about energy and food resilience, they are both solutions to both problems. And I think what I get very frustrated about is that we talk an awful lot about it and do not a lot about, you know, we're not actually doing very much about it. And I don't think that's a reflection of us in the room. I think that is a lack of a coordinated, clearly worked out strategy that everybody can sign up to at government level. So I hope at least the petition and the lobbying of Parliament actually starts to make the lack of joined upness and incoherency visible, and the frustrations that we have as parish councillors, in particular parish and town councillors, at actually getting stuff done, because the whole system seems to be geared against you rather than with you. End of rant.
It's not clear to me, David. Are you advocating a forum that will put together this particular policy, rather than saying the government can't do it itself?
I don't know what the right mechanism is, but one of the things that we do need to do is we need to be much more joined up in terms of how we are and engaged with. So, for example, if you're dealing with food security, then we should be part of that conversation. You'll have the grown-ups in at the government level making the long-term strategic decisions, but you know, let's all work together to try and make it happen. I mean, there are all sorts of exciting things going on in terms of agriculture and the way in which you can generate stuff in much smaller spaces. But you know, one of the things we've got to stop doing is building on the bloody land and actually covering it in solar panels. You know, if we want food, you can't have that. We've got to think about a slightly more grown-up solution to power. We need micro nuclear generators, from my particular view, as a core capability stitched out throughout the whole of the country, and that buys us out of the need to depend on fossil fuels. It is naive to assume that we can do everything through solar and wind. It's just not going to happen. So again, a joined up, well thought through strategy that we as parish and town councils particularly can play our part in, both in terms of change of behaviours, changing capability, as well as putting in the resilient systems when things start to go wrong, which they will do in the short to medium term.
Okay, thank you. Piers, please.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Apologies for having the camera off. The connection's been a bit slow, but hopefully you can hear me okay. Yeah, Jamie, I think kind of just to echo like what you're saying, how the screenings have been a real catalyst for kind of getting people back together that maybe were kind of involved in kind of climate action a few years ago and have gone off slightly disparate directions, doing different things, all doing good work. But I think it's definitely been really strong to see the number of screenings that are kind of popping up and the numbers of people that are attending them. Going back to Andrew's point about the kind of community action, so that's kind of Forest and Dean Climate Action Partnership. That's what we're about, supporting community action, and it's been a really useful catalyst to kind of lead into kind of how we can signpost and support people with taking action in the community. What I noticed was from the early doors kind of version of the script, which I first looked at, there were kind of changes which seemed to have taken out that kind of climate, the local action and how people could get involved. That seemed to change.
Interesting.
So it's interesting that you feel like you're going back to it. I'm wondering whether that was down to timings, but I've been to a couple of kind of follow-up meetings from the different screenings have done, and that's been really helpful. But perhaps some guidance around how follow-up meetings might be managed might be helpful for kind of people that are organising them. And then there's the kind of, I think you sent me some helpful advice recently just to clarify about running online screenings. I now find myself in a position of being asked to run in person and an online screening for the local town and parish councillors and elected members. And if there was any kind of guidance around how to do that, that would be quite helpful, I think, in terms of how to structure things and the timings, because it will change that a little bit. And I think that, oh yeah, the only other thing was just having read the council briefing document yesterday and had a meeting with some of the officers at the council. It struck me that quite a lot of the advice in there is aimed at larger local authorities, and actually if there was some more bespoke stuff to help with the discussion for at parish level, where the kind of responsibilities are different for the different tiers. But yeah, thank you for all your hard work on this.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Piers. In terms of the local action roll forwards, I think that was outside my time, so I'm not actually over what the changes were, but yeah, I think from my perspective, encouraging more local action is definitely something that we want to do. Actually, even making space for it on the handout, the template handout that goes out to that's given to everybody, and also I really agree with your point about encouraging the need for follow-up meetings. I think our sense was that hosts were likely to feel quite exhausted by the end of hosting, and maybe these things would happen organically. But in retrospect, when we've seen them done well, they really, really work, and they really do continue the mobilization of local people. So I think it's probably incumbent on me to ensure that there is at least one follow-up meeting for every screening that's happened and put together. So that's definitely something I completely agree with you on. The parish level advice, I would be really interested if you or anyone else on this call wanted to give me some thoughts on what shape that would take. That would definitely be something that I would value your expertise on. So do feel free to drop me an email if you've got any, just even top line thoughts on what you think would be most suitable for parish councils in terms of post-film discussion, what the kind of areas of risk management might be from within a parish council background. I'm aware of the limits of my own knowledge in terms of this and my own experience. So yeah, so any insight or pointers would be gratefully received.
I'd be with you in that category as well, Jamie, but I'm sure there's lots of people on this call that could help.
Thank you, Piers. Moving on to Gary, please.
Hi, Jamie. The current ask for the National Emergency Briefing Team is for a government briefing on the climate emergency. I was just wondering how often are you hoping that this national briefing will take place by the government, and what is it that you're hoping that they're going to communicate to people on the climate emergency?
Those are really great questions, actually. So because we get this quite a lot, there's actually quite a detailed outline of what it is that we think a televised emergency briefing would look like, which I'm going to pop in the chat for you because it's actually quite a lot in it. So I won't bore you all by going through it by line, but let me just stick it here because it is something that an awful lot of people ask us about. I mean, in terms of the top line, what we really want to see is that the government is treating the emergency briefing with the real seriousness that it did, as if it were a crisis. So thinking back to those COVID briefings is a really useful parallel because these were, science-led, properly informing the public about risk and informing the public about what government response should be and what individuals' response should be as well. So it's very much about ensuring that there is honesty and frankness in that conversation, that it's science-led, that it's delivered by independent experts selected for their recognised authority and credibility. And we're really hopeful that the briefing would take in, some of the things that we've been talking about risk assessment in terms of national security, food security, these really big topics, but that actually have, direct impact on people's daily lives. So ensuring that happens, we think if it happened at that scale and with that level of frankness and openness and treating the public like grown-ups, to echo what I think it was David was saying, that this would actually really change the conversation within the UK. And this wouldn't be a one-off briefing. This would be, a kind of a start of a national process. And it would be very much a process of explaining, well, this is the emergency and this is the emergency response. And I think if we can get to that position, we'll be in a much better place than we are at the moment, where we're kind of pretending that there isn't an emergency and the response is not kind of commensurate with the emergency that the science is saying that we are facing. And as part of that, obviously, having the buy-in, having it delivered by government, having it introduced by the Prime Minister, lends it a level of gravity and seriousness that I think would ensure that it would be across all TV channels, radio station, it would be mass media and then down into social media, reaching everybody, really. I think it would be a bit of a showstopper of a conversation to have that level of honesty and frankness about the science and the risks.
Yeah.
So I hope that makes some sense. But like I said, I'll pop the link in the chat for the longer thing.
Yeah, but I can see the government's reluctance then, Jamie, because, that's just going to open them up to claims of hypocrisy like at every level. If they're telling people, this is what you should be doing, and this is the risks of doing something. And then, like you say, you're hearing in the news about government plans and, it's a really massive risk to anybody to go up and say, oh, this is what it come back into COVID. It's like Boris again, oh, yes, you shouldn't be meeting with people and having parties and stuff.
I do hear what you're saying. I do hear what you're saying, Gary, but equally there is huge risk if we do nothing. And one would be hopeful that having this conversation would trigger the emergency response that we need. There's a key line in the film which I think resonates with a lot of people, which is that the physics doesn't care about the politics, and the physics is going to keep doing what it's going to do. And sadly, for the majority of us, that means quite catastrophic impacts. If we don't get a handle on this, impacts that we're already seeing this year and will continue to see. So while I completely take your point about how uncomfortable this might be for certain politicians to be confronting the science in that way, sadly, there is a choice. We either do that or we, end up in a much worse situation than we're in at the moment.
Frank, you've been remarkably patient. Thank you.
I think, Jimmy, I hear what you're saying. I hear what everyone's been saying. I think we are unfortunately getting towards a break point where you may have to decide not to be apolitical and to say political parties must now say what they stand for. Do they believe in the science or don't they? We have a government in power in Westminster who have rolled back on most of the green promises they made to get elected. We have a Conservative Party, as you say, that says it's going to do away with woke net zero. We've just heard Essex Council is now throwing out all its stuff. We've got a bizarre situation where an extremist marginal party has decided it can launch attacks on people for being obsessed with net zero, when actually I remember 76 and then we should all just get out and enjoy the sunshine. And as long as we allow that to happen, but don't actually put them in a corner and say, this is the truth, this is the science, these are the facts, then political parties will continue to try and, without actually going as far as reform, follow similar paths and saying, yes, we're not actually talking about a climate crisis here. We're not actually going to do emergency things. I mean, we just had discussions earlier on about whether or not the oil fields in Scotland are going to be approved or not. That should be a no-brainer. It shouldn't be something that's up for debate. The fact that our Prime Minister is worrying about whether or not he's going to do it, and as an interim measure has said, let's ban mobile barbecues, suggests that apolitical is not working. And I'm not going to put you on the spot today, because I appreciate NEB has come from a certain place and done certain things, but we are gradually being picked off, council by council, MP by MP, by people who are willing to embrace the fake news. Let's destroy the science in a way that's been unprecedented. I think we were probably lucky in COVID, and it's hard to believe that having Boris as PM meant we were lucky, but we're lucky in COVID because there wasn't a political party that was anti-vax. We didn't have someone standing up there saying, no, vaccinations are useless. Let's inject ourselves with bleach instead. It's much better. So that didn't happen, and we didn't have an election during that period. I dread to think what would have happened if we'd had those two things coming together. But what we do have is a political party that will say whatever it thinks will rouse the masses, and use that as a means of trying to get votes and get power. And we're in a real risk that when we speak the truth, when we say, here's what the science is, we're seen as being just another group of people trying to blame someone. So just as there are parties out there that blame everything on immigration, that blame everything on work for net zero, we get seen as we're blaming everything on climate change. The fact that it's true and the science backs it up won't actually matter. People will vote for the easy option, and the people who promise them jam tomorrow, because that's what they've always voted for. So I huge fan of what you're doing in the national briefing. I'm busy trying to we're a coalition of villages in Southwest Stirling. We've got half of them have done briefings so far. Our high school's about to do a briefing. We're really enthusiastic about it, and it's great stuff. But I think we need to develop sharper teeth, because we need to have that fight back on saying the science is here, and political parties will have to stand up and be counted.
And, very interestingly, we are at the point now where the conversation about the science used to be this will happen in the future, and now I think what's shifting this year in particular, and likely into next year as the El Nino continues, is very much being able to point and say this is what the science said would happen. And nobody likes to be I told you so, but it does feel like we are entering into the I told you so moment, which is not a good place to be in, given the level of risks that we face. So I do hear you. I go back to what I say about the physics and the politics, and we need to, I think what's really brilliant about the National Emergency Briefing, and I'm really pleased to hear about the local screenings you're doing. I mean, huge thanks to you. I think that's just so useful, is ensuring that people are being informed at the level that they probably need to be. or at least made aware of the risk that the science is saying is out there, and will impact their communities. And I guess that's what I'm trying to say. 2026 seems to be the year when actually communities across the UK have been impacted not once but multiple times by this. And I do wonder how long that can continue before people, actually do join you in your stance of saying, okay, enough's enough. I don't know.
Well, I think the thing that came out as the most frightening in the film was that the changes that they'd been saying were going to happen are actually happening a lot faster than they expected them to, and that's really awful. So, yeah, we'll see. Well, does anyone else have any questions for Jamie, please, before we wrap this up? It's been a fascinating morning, Jamie. Thank you so much for your time and trouble and taking the care. And we've got a question from Nick Drew.
Yeah, hi Jamie. It's great to have you on the team. But I'm conscious that there's a lot of different networks and organisations and groups that are sort of part of the response to this. And I'm sure it's not within your capacity or even within the NEB's aims to actually try and coordinate all that. But it does feel that there is a need for that to happen somehow. And things like the Great Collaboration are a sort of an attempt in that space. But do you have a vision, Jamie, within the NEB team about how far along that road you can actually go with the limited resources you've got? Because it does feel that there's a lot of excitement about the film and capacity that people would like to put to useful action, but there's just that sort of coordination piece feels very, very missing somehow.
Mm-hmm. No, I take your point, Nick. I think that coordination is consistently a problem in terms of climate and nature because it's such a sprawling crisis, right? And so there are many different ways into it and many different groups doing really, really important and valuable work. We are trying to partner with as many people as possible, and there's lots of ongoing conversations at the moment. I think the petition hitting 100,000 people and the idea that there might be a debate in Parliament is certainly really useful, I think, from that point of view. I don't think it is for us to be necessarily leading the charge on that coordination, and I don't think we have the capacity to do it either. But hopefully the flag that we're planting in the ground, with a very clear kind of end point to bring people on towards is one that's really useful. And hopefully the continued kind of rolling out of the science in an accessible way to people is also really useful in terms of that broader coalition that I think you're referring to. I don't know how that coordination happens, to be honest with you, at such a huge scale. I wonder if it happens organically or if it has to be managed top down. I don't know. But I do agree with you that it would be great to see more of it. So, yes.
Chris, you wanted to have another go?
Yeah, thank you. I'm hoping you can hear me.
Yep.
The most difficult topic that we need to cover sensitively is that of mass migration. When humans find their locality, the area where they live becomes uninhabitable, they move. We are going to see millions and millions moving to the northern and southern latitudes, as it were. And obviously this plays into one of the political parties' game plans. So how do we answer the fact that as a result of mass migration, we will have to cope with mass migration into this country as a result of climate change? And how do we deal with that? I'm just putting that out there because that's a question that will inevitably come up time and time again. Thank you.
Well, in the PEB, that was raised as a national security level, wasn't it? Because the people who are responsible for our security are looking at this and saying, well, we see this is going to happen. So, yeah, you're right to raise it, but I think it has been spotted. Anyone else, please, before I say thank you all for coming to what's been a fascinating session, and I hope it's got lots of people inspired to help do more things locally. As you probably all recognise, we do publish the results of this on the knowledge base, and you'll all be able to see the chats and the links and the helpful suggestions that have been made, and I'll let you all know when it's been done. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.